inspired, fired up, and on the move. Yeah, 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 yeah. From all the places and all the races, arm in arm now, upon our feet. Yeah, 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 yeah. From all the schools and all the homes, it's time to take it. It's time to take it to the street.
Gonna get militant up in here. Hello, my friends, and welcome once again to this week's edition of The Call, the program that calls you to taking direct action, educating yourself and others, empowering your community so that we can have advocacy, policy change, organizing in our communities, and all the things that we need to create a better world. And today, our guest is a good friend of mine and someone who has been working hard to make the world a better place for a long time. He is Dr. Winston Carroo, and he is with Agricultural Missions Incorporated, the director of international programs, and also program manager for the West African Initiative. Welcome, Dr. Carroo.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you very much.
Okay, great to have you on. And let's start off first of all by you just sharing with the audience a little bit about agricultural missions, its history, how we got started, and from there, tell us something about yourself and how you got involved in the work that you are doing.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our listeners. As Reverend said, my name is Winston Carroo, and I am the program director for the West Africa Initiative, and the director for international programs for agricultural missions. Well, Agricultural Missions is an ecumenical organization that was started way back in the 1930s by the mainline churches here in the United States, who at the time were sending a lot of missionaries overseas to convert people, to convert souls. And some of those missionaries felt the need to also minister to the physical needs of people to whom they were ministering in the rural parts of all over the world, in Asia, in Africa, and in Latin America. And they said one of the biggest needs was people's need to improve their ability to produce their own food. In these places, agriculture and farming and food production is very seasonal. And the seasonal as determined by the rainy season and the dry season. There is a season also called the hunger season, which is just before the harvest in each country or in each region. And that is a time that people just subsist on no meals or one meal a day. Simply, when people produce, they either do not produce enough or they have no facilities to store the food so it will last for a period of time. So they are totally dependent on what we call rain-fed agriculture. So agricultural missions at its beginning in the 1930s sent agricultural missions overseas to work alongside the people, the evangelists who were trying to spread the word. And that continued back up until the 60s when there were the independence movement or the movement for political independence in these countries was very active, and the missionary enterprise was coming to a close. But the folks said, we still need the input of agricultural missions. We still need them here. But agricultural missions decided that it was best for sustainability in the long term, instead of sending missionaries overseas, to train people to take over. So they did training in country, and they actually at one point brought local leaders to the United States for agricultural training at some of the agricultural colleges here in the United States. And that continued up until the 70s, the end of the 70s, when we did not do that anymore because institutions were being developed in local countries, universities, and some of them by agricultural missions. Nanking
Mm,
University in China, agricultural missions was very instrumental in starting that institution and others, agricultural schools. So we supported people in their countries to attend schools if they were available in their countries or in the region. Like the Methodist University in Zimbabwe is a very good example. That was developed by the United Methodist Church, and they had a very strong agriculture department. So folks from Africa, we supported to go to to um, to that university and others like it in other parts of the world.
mm,
Along the way, we felt strongly also that a local institution in each country was also important because if you have technicians, if you have agriculturalists, and there is no structure, there is no institutional structure locally in which they would work and relate to the farmers in their villages, that was also important to administer the program. So we encouraged and facilitated the development in each country of local NGOs and local farmers groups. And that's how we work today. We
mm,
relate to, we call them local partners in each country. And they in turn, through their local staff, relate to the villages. Of course, since we are responsible for the reporting and responsible for funds for the program, we need to make sure that um, what we are told and what folks say is going on in the field is really actually happening. So, in my capacity as program international director for international programs, I would very often visit these places and go into the villages, and then do refresher training courses for the local staff.
mm.
Okay, so that's how we work, and that's the history of agricultural missions to date. And again, even up to now, most of our support comes from the major churches here in the United States and from individuals.
That's amazing work, and you gave us a pretty long history, and I just was listening to the breadth, the span of work that took place from the 1930s and continues on today. But what brought you to this work? When did you begin to become involved with agriculture and also on international level?
Yeah, well, I'm a country boy from Jamaica. I grew up in a rural area. My father at that time worked on an agricultural research farm, and he was working on bananas, trying to develop resistant varieties to what they call in Jamaica Panama disease, which later I learned is caused by nematodes in the soil, which bore
Mm,
into the roots of the bananas and allow fungus to get in there into the root, and it will destroy the plants and reduce it. And then I all through my and he was also a small farmer growing rice at the time. We
mm,
produced the rice in Jamaica. So I'm a farm boy. And then I through my earlier years and my teenage years, the family moved to Kingston, because the capital city, because there were better schools.
mm,
And I went there, and after high school, I went to a local teachers college called Michael Teachers College, which is the oldest teachers college in the Western Hemisphere.
wow.
And I spent 3 years there, after which I taught science in the high schools for Jamaica. Unfortunate for me, I received a scholarship to go to Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, and
Mm-hmm,
there I studied agriculture, and I began to understand the things I observed through my youth, which I didn't know. I didn't know the reasons why these things, why plants flower at a certain time, why they have the diseases, what are called the diseases, and so on. And while I was at Cornell University, I had a couple colleagues who were African American people who were also studying at Cornell University. And we formed an organization called Agricultural Teams, not agricultural missions, and agricultural
Mm-hmm.
teams. And the idea was that we, as students who were studying agriculture, could, during that time, provide whatever technical resources we could to the African American farmers in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And through that process, I became connected with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. This was the early 70s. This, we're talking about 70, 72 period. So that was what, 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I finished my studies at Cornell University, I went to work at the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And I spent 3 years there at their Rural Research Center in Epps, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, agricultural teams was mature enough and had enough funding so I could work with them full time. I still lived in Alabama while I did that. And so we began working. And then at that time, in about 1977, Agricultural Missions asked me to come on the board, their board of directors. So I did. So I worked with agricultural teams through the 70s. And then the early 80s, I started to do, on the contract, I started to do training for the US Peace Corps,
Mm-hmm.
training in agriculture for volunteers who were going overseas. And the training site we had were actually there in South Carolina. It was at Penn Center on St. Helena Island.
Oh, yes, down by Buford.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent 8 years there. And then I went to Jamaica to be Peace Corps training director for the Peace Corps here there in Jamaica. And in 1992, Agricultural Missions enticed me to come on their staff. That was 1992, and that's when I joined as staff. Although I was associated with the organization from 1977, in 1992, I joined the staff of Agricultural Missions with responsibility for our partner relationships for partners in the Caribbean and Africa. So that's what brought me to this work.
Oh, great, great. And I'm sitting here, I'm listening, and I'm like, wow, from Jamaica to New York, Alabama, and I was thinking about someone else who worked with African Americans from Jamaica, and that's the great Marcus Garvey. And
Exactly.
he also had great ties to Africa. Yes, Africa for Africans at home and abroad. Yes.
I should mention incidentally, when I was with agricultural teams after Alabama, the office located to Raleigh, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And there I met a man named Howard Wesley, who was the local, I guess, director for the Universal Negro Improvement Association,
Yes.
UNIA. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
organization that Marcus Garvey formed.
Yes.
And I linked up with him and I actually went with him to a conference in Jamaica
Mm-hmm.
on UNIA. Yes, kind of a circle. Yes.
Yes, and the Universal Negro Improvement Association also very much like you did work in South America and in Central America and the Caribbean and in Africa, and that is amazing. And long before people today started talking about working together globally, those roots were planted in the early 20th century, and people like yourself can continue that work. So, along with the work that, wow, it's amazing you talked about the longevity of Agricultural Missions Incorporated and working in Asia and Africa and just around the world. But the West African Initiative, I find that truly amazing. When when I went to my first event with Agricultural Missions Incorporated. That was one of the things that really caught my attention, the West African Initiative. How did Agricultural Missions and you yourself decide to focus on those two countries in West Africa, Sierra Leone and Liberia? How did that work start, and how did you navigate some truly hard times, hard challenges, like during the Civil War and the Ebola crisis? Tell us a little bit about why Sierra Leone, why Liberia, and how the work has progressed through challenging times and the best of times.
Yes. Before the West Africa Initiative came into being, we had partners in all over Africa, in Ghana, in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, in Kenya, in Uganda. And agricultural missions actually was very, very supportive of the liberation struggles in Mozambique, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, and in Angola.
Mm-hmm.
In Angola. Okay, so we had partners, so we were very familiar with the terrain there. Now we focused on the West Africa Initiative focused on Liberia and Sierra Leone because of the civil war in both of these countries. They were separate wars, although
Mm-hmm.
they were linked in some way. And these two countries, Liberia and Sierra Leone, they share a common border. They're neighboring countries. And the civil war was through the 80s and ended in the early 90s through peace, through negotiation and peace. And even today, people are in both countries are not sure what the civil war was all about. It was just the leadership who were people who just wanted power and wealth,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them have died, or and some are in jail in the Hague, in the International Court in the Hague. Some are in prison there. But
Mm-hmm.
the civil war in both of these countries was a bush war. It was a rural war. So what happened is that the rural communities were totally the physical infrastructure, the social infrastructure was totally destroyed. They had these young men who were pumped full of dope, and they went and just burned. Some of them burned their own villages and killed their own parents.
Mm-hmm.
They were high on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So when the war ended after about 12 or 14 years, depending on which country, the rural sector was totally empty. People fled to the large towns and cities in search of safety. There were no farms, no schools, no health centers, nothing. Just the ashes of the war that existed in both of these countries. So when the war was over, the local councils of churches, who were also instrumental in negotiating the peace, asked their partners here in the United States to help with restoration of these communities, and they provided emergency aid. Agricultural missions is not in the business of doing emergency support. We do development work, not relief work. But one of our strongest supporters here in the United States, which is Presbyterian Church USA,
Mm-hmm.
asked us to go, and us agricultural missions to go and work with their councils of churches in both of these countries to help to develop the local food capacity in these villages. So when they did that, of course, we said yes, and that fell in my lap because at the time Africa was my responsibility. So we started, in consultation with the churches. We went and we developed a program to start to develop local food production at the village level. But because of our strong belief that it is not sustainable for us to go in there and do that, we started this program after initially uh, discussing it with councils of churches in both of these countries. Um, you started actually with the training of local leaders. I conducted the training actually lasts for 18 months.
Mhm.
It was a comprehensive rural development program. And it started out with a 3 week workshop in Sierra Leone where people from Liberia, the churches in Liberia selected who came to this. You know, we provided the criteria and said these folks must be so so and so. They must live in the communities where they're going to work. They must be able to understand English
Mhm.
and all that. So these people are the workhorse of the program. They are local. We call them community facilitators. They are people in the villages who we train to work with the farmers. So after that initial 3 week training session, these folks went back to their villages, and the staff of the local churches were the people who were responsible for supporting these folks while they do their work.
Mhm.
So we started out by providing support while they work to develop the local farmers groups in each village. That was very successful. Then we provided seeds and tools for farmers to produce whatever their staple crop was. It was mostly rice. Because at that time, I went to villages, I saw people trying to plant rice with sticks, sharpened sticks.
Wow.
They don't even have a machete, which costs 50 cents.
Mhm.
So we provided them with tools and seeds, and we say to them, okay, after this first year, you need to save your seeds for the second year. We're not going to provide you seeds again. At that time, we provided bags which were sealed properly so that it could store it properly so it could be safe from insects and disease and mold.
Mhm.
So the program, as I said, the training program was for 18 months, and during the time we had refresher courses in both Liberia and Sierra Leone, where these facilitators would come together, and I would do the training of that with support from local folks who we could find who believed in what we believed in and had the capacity to do that. So along the way, after about 3 years of doing food support, the folks looked around and said, "Okay, we need a little more now. We need a way. We need some way to continue this and to do work in other areas to make rural villages more livable." Okay, so we started other programs like microcredit for women who would go to the towns and buy stuff and come back and sell it and then
Mhm.
buy the produce from local farmers and take it to the cities. These women, they call themselves petty traders. Petty don't mean not important. It's from the
Mhm.
French word petit, means small. They were small traders.
Right, right.
Right. And their total inventory was not more than $5.
Wow.
You know, because transportation was a problem. They couldn't carry a whole lot of stuff. And some of these women, they had their little stalls, and you saw some of them, their little shops, which still go on today. We
Mhm.
provided rudimentary training in how to keep records. How do you know if you're making a profit? How to display your goods. How to determine your prices, because some people, they just went and bought stuff and sold it what the other person was selling it for.
Right. Mhm.
They did not figure in their own labor. So they didn't know if they were making a profit and if this was sustainable. So we provided
Mhm.
training to these women and how to keep simple records and how to determine what to price your produce, your goods at, and how to keep records, and how do you figure out whether how much money you are making and all this kind of thing. So that
Yeah.
and then there was a problem of health, and everybody agreed that ill health was due to bad water.
Mm-hmm.
People just went and collected water when rain falls. They put their things outside and collect water, or they go to the nearest stream or swamp with their buckets and collected water. That's what they drank. That's what they washed their clothes in. That's what they use for cooking and all that. And at that time, a lot of other NGOs, international NGOs, were coming in and installing wells
Uh-huh.
and hand pumps. But I was amazed that they came in, did not relate to the local people. They put in the wells, put in the hand pumps, and pumped to make sure water was coming out, and then they left.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, a hand pump has a lot of moving parts,
Mm-hmm.
rubber parts or plastic parts, which after a year wear. And then the pump stopped working. People could not, and they were sealed, but you could not drop a bucket in there and pull water up.
Wow.
So when the pump stopped working, people go back to the old
Back to the
method,
stream.
go back to where they were after a year. So in all of these villages, you will see a pump which was not being used, which was made unusable because people were not um, taught how to maintain and how to manage these pumps.
Mm-hmm.
So we started out by providing training in how to repair and maintain these pumps. Some of them were beyond repair. So in some places we had to install new pumps. We use local technicians to dig the pumps mostly by hand. The international the international NGOs, they had machines and they dug boreholes which were yay wide, 4 inches wide, just enough to
Right.
accommodate the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
But with these what we did with these holes that we did, men actually went down in there and dug holes by hand.
Mm-hmm.
And when we sealed the top, we left a manhole, so you could lift the top off and drop a bucket in there and pull water up if the pump went bad.
Right. Simple solution.
Simple solution. Some of them had a pulley where you turn by hand that could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And some villages, people say we don't want hand pumps because we know they go bad. We don't want what happened to the others happen to us. Just give us the pulley system. Where you
Mm-hmm.
put your bucket, or they use inner tubes from cars and trucks, and they fashion that into their lifting because the buckets themselves, like 5 gallons or 2 gallons, it is heavy, so they use these tubes, inner tubes,
Uh-huh.
as a container, and they drop that in there and they come up and they empty it into their buckets because it was easier to pull up, it was lighter.
Mm-hmm.
So in a lot of places we repaired the pumps. We got a local technician who would still now go around because you teach somebody something and it's a pump that you start working, and there's no way for them to practice their skills once the pumps start working.
Mm-hmm.
They wait again for another year or two when the pumps go bad, but the technician is always there. They can call on him and he can go to the village and do refresher courses and pump maintenance.
So how many villages are we talking about, Winston, in
uh,
each country?
we started in each country with about between 5 and 10 villages back in 1995, 96.
Mm-hmm.
Today in Liberia, we have almost 30 villages, and in Sierra Leone, almost 40 villages.
Mm-hmm. Wow. 70 all together, and the technicians service all of these villages, and they're remote villages also. Not all of them are near large cities,
Right.
correct?
We put emphasis on remote villages. You know, we're in the rainy season. Sometimes people are completely cut off because the roads are so bad. They're washed out, and not even motorcycles can get there. Yeah,
Mhm.
these are very remote villages. Yeah.
Right, and the people even today, when I visited with you and others, people don't still don't have electricity or running water in many of these places. But what I'm interested in is you talked about how you were able to improve health, and but the diversity of crops, and how did you and others were able to improve nutrition. And one of the things that really struck me, I remember over and over as we visited different villages, you ask how many children are in school, and can you talk about how growing crops and focusing on just cash crops can be detrimental to villagers' health, and also how, as you improved and creating what I often like to call creating engines of economic development, how that ties in with children being able to go to school and women having and gaining more rights and being more active in business and other things.
Yes, you know, when I went to these villages first, children just did not go to school. First, a lot of schools were destroyed during the war,
Mhm.
and the churches traditionally, even before the war, they had schools in a lot of these villages, and they were essentially free, but you have to have teachers, and kids have to have uniforms. They have to have books. And today you will go there. A lot of kids don't wear shoes to school. Just like I did when I was growing up. I didn't wear shoes to school.
Mm,
But kids, they kids go to here, even here. It was here in the United States. People find out that if kids come to school hungry, they can't learn.
right.
They have so lots of schools have breakfast programs here, even here in the United States. And I noticed the visual evidence of malnutrition was so prevalent, which was distended stomachs and orange colored hair.
Mm.
And when you went, I don't know how much of that you saw.
Didn't see too much, saw a little bit, but
Right.
you could also see, I could kind of see transitioning. You could see people who were doing better and those who were not.
Right. So the main the main problem of poor attendance in school or lack of kids going to school is economic.
Mm,
You have to have uniforms. I don't know why, but you have to have uniforms. If you don't pay fees because the government mandate, but the schools need things. They
mhm.
need they need chalkboards. They need chalk. They need teachers need support in terms of in terms of salaries, but a lot of them got paid, but usually sometimes 6 months pass, they don't have salaries. you
Wow.
know so what we did with our facilitators, we say we are not going to pay you, you are volunteers, but what we will do, we will help you earn a living. Just like we say to the farmers, we're going to support you in your farms, and a lot of these facilitators are themselves farmers, and we supported them on their farms. Some of them, we supported their wives to do microcredit so they could generate some income too. But one big thing in both countries, we introduced beekeeping.
Mm.
and honey
Bees.
production. Yeah, honey production, because there was a good
Mm-hmm.
market for that. And we supported them with loans for beehives, and we trained them how to make hives, how to set the hives, how to harvest honey, and how to process honey. And a lot of people have built houses. You go to each village and you look at the roof of a house, and you know who is doing well, because it's a tin roof and not a straw
The
roof.
thatch roof, the
Right,
saw
yeah,
straw roof. Yeah.
yeah, the thatch roof. Um, a lot of farm families have built their houses from money made from beekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's it.
and then one other thing to go back to your question about education, people there place a lot of emphasis on their educating their kids. They see that as a way of escaping poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, they also see it as a way of escaping the rural villages.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately.
We even see that in the United
Yeah,
States in a
all
lot
over the
of
world.
small towns and rural area. The kids are like, "Hey, get an education. I can get out of here, go to the big city, and make a lot
Exactly.
more money." Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that unfortunately for Africa, you go to the city, there are no jobs.
Mm-hmm.
There are absolutely no jobs. So a lot of these young men, mostly young men go, although some young women do. Most young men, they end up somebody would buy a motorcycle and give it to them to operate as a taxi.
Mm-hmm. And they were all over the place,
All
both
over the
countries.
place. Create
Yeah.
create traffic jams, and
Mm, yeah.
or facilitate or country coordinator in Liberia. You met Sentu.
Yes, and
Oh,
two.
Sentu.
Mhm.
Over Christmas, a motorcycle hit her down.
Wow.
This young man was did not have a license. He was like 10 or 12 years old, and he was not even operating a taxi. Some other guy who gave him it to ride,
Hmm.
and Santa was seriously injured.
Oh, I was going to ask you how is she?
She's doing well now. She's doing well.
Okay.
She had to spend a couple of weeks in the hospital because she had some head and
Oh
injuries
Lord.
and her arm and stuff. I tell you. But yeah, but that's all the jobs these young men can find in the towns and cities.
Hmm.
You know, or they become porters, carry people's goods.
Hmm.
When the market women come in, they need somebody to carry their goods from the bus station or the truck station to the market. Or somebody goes shopping and buy furniture or building materials or something, they would carry it. That's the kind of jobs
Hmm.
that are there. And I
Or
don't
at
know
the
why. Yeah,
or
yeah.
at the airport.
Or at the airport. Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. The government now is they became such a unorganized throng at the airport harassing passengers. The government kind of cracked down on that and put some order to it.
Hmm.
The good thing, the government, they train them and organize them so they become regular porters.
Good,
We
good.
call them here red caps or whatever you call them.
Hmm.
It's organized, but they provide jobs for not all of them who were available or who were there, but some of them.
Hmm.
Yeah. But as I said, market women, when you ask them, what do you do with the money you make? I send my children to school. And the way things are organized there socially is that the women have responsibility for the children,
Hmm.
their health, their education, their clothing, and so on. The men earn money to do things like build and repair the house and stuff like that. The women, the money they do, they go toward. That's how their division of labor is. It goes toward the home and the children.
Uh, and the women also help with farming. I saw a
Right.
lot of women working with in the cassava fields, and they also take care of the chickens if there's chickens, right?
Yeah, the way the division of labor in the farming sector is that The men do the work of clearing the land, preparing the land, and plant. And with the woman might share that too. And then the women do the planting and the weeding. At harvest time, the men come back and help with the harvest. The more strenuous work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Although there are a lot of women now who are doing farming for themselves because they know what the consumer, the men, they want to do the cash crops.
Right, right.
The cash
They want to
crops.
go after the big money.
They want to go after the money. And the
Yeah.
women, they do the crops that feed the family, the vegetables and that kind of thing, and the fruits.
Hmm.
That's how it's organized.
So I was, I was really excited wanting to go back to Sierra Leone and Liberia with you and seeing if we can bring in some of the technology that's available. I looked and, we looked and saw how they would have meeting houses and outdoor meeting places and looked and when you told me, you said, the children have to study by candlelight and kerosene lamps if
Uh,
they have kerosene. I was like, wow, it would not take, because everything over there doesn't take a lot of money
right,
compared to what things cost in the US. And I said just a few solar panels
yeah,
could provide lighting for a village so that children could study at night,
right,
so that when a baby is being born, perhaps it's not happening by candlelight. And so, seeing some of the things that could be done. And I was amazed because I know you also said about having to be cautious when you want to deal with health issues there, because people still will go to uh, those in the bush who
yeah.
have
Bush
other
doctors,
ways. What did you call them?
bush doctors.
Bush doctors,
Yeah,
right?
the name now they use are traditional healers.
Traditional healers, but
Right,
sometimes what they advise people to do is not beneficial. So, talk
right.
a little bit about, because we have listeners, and when the pandemic dies down, I still would love to see you, and perhaps we'll be blessed to go back, but how we can help people with things like bringing basic, simple things like lighting, using solar panels, helping more with water, micro lending. You talk about beekeeping and other things that our listeners and other organizations may want to partner with agricultural missions with the West African Initiative. Um, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, yes, that is true. Electricity is as we know it in terms of poles and wires
Mhm.
is not going to ever come to these villages because of two things: the amount of money it would cost to. You see how far some of these villages are,
Oh yes,
and
hours.
yeah, right, and how much wires and poles it would take to get electricity there. And electricity is a commodity like any other. It goes to those people who are able to pay for it.
Mhm.
And these villages are not able to. Most of these villages, most people in Sierra Leone, whether they are in the city or in the village, they exist on less than $1.25 a day.
Mhm.
In terms of their income, a lot
And
of
we
them.
think, and we think we're poor in America.
Yeah, and the subsistence economy in these rural villages, people live. I would say people who earn less than 50 cents a day. You know,
Mhm.
so it's not going to come. So we have to look at alternatives. And solar for lighting is the only way to go. Solar for lighting to begin with, and solar for our water for everything else.
Mhm.
I don't think we can do windmills in these places because we don't have a lot of wind there. But some places have rivers. Maybe they can do hydroelectricity, but that's not on the horizon anytime soon.
Mhm.
Although there are in Liberia and Sierra Leone, there are hydroelectric stations that supply some of the cities.
And
Now,
that's not very reliable across Africa. Electricity um, generation is not very reliable, even in
right,
the largest cities.
right. In Monrovia, the capital city of Liberia, and Kenema, where we were, the large town, in the dry season, they have no electricity because the dams are low. There's not enough water to generate electricity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in the cities, you have people who have their own generators, like businesses and so on. So, and that's another source of carbon.
Mm-hmm.
That's another source of pollution. But
Yes.
these village homes, people do two things in these things. I guess they sleep and they store stuff in there. They don't
Mm-hmm.
cook in there. They don't eat in there. They don't play in there. The kids don't study in there.
Mm-hmm.
So people cook outside and the kids play outside. That's why in a lot of these villages there is what they call a community barri or a palava hut, where people, if they
Mm-hmm.
want to talk together, that's where they go.
Right.
Right,
Palava. Talk.
palava. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
talk. Right, palava hut. So what one idea would be to get these solar lights that don't need any maintenance or anything, and put in these palava huts, and if they're not there, find a church hall or something, because all these villages have churches, no matter how rudimentary they are. There's
Mm-hmm.
a church or a mosque, because there are
Right.
Muslims there, so that children can go and do their homework.
Right. And
Okay.
so we want to encourage people, our listeners, to support this with Agricultural Missions Incorporated, so that we can, there's no reason why, um, in this age of technological advancement, that we should have areas that can have simple, basic human needs met by providing solar for water, for lighting, even from heat for heating. They even have solar ovens. I mean, and
Right,
none of
right.
these things are very expensive. But you talked about, like the dry season, and how even in the capital, there may not be electricity because the water is too low in the dams, so that the hydro plants, the hydroelectric plants, can't function. So we know that climate impacts are because of the warming of the planet, that the southern part of the earth is is actually experiencing more climate impacts, and they're more frequent, they're more extreme. So what have you seen, and I don't know about our audience, but Agricultural Missions Incorporated has been there on the ground working with people through the era of colonialism, 1930, 40, 50s, during the time of independence, the struggles for independence. And you mentioned, Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and being connected with those liberation groups, MPLA, Frelimo, African Nationalist Congress, and even up into this day and time when climate impacts are becoming more extreme. What are you seeing? Are you seeing that the dry seasons are becoming drier, the rainy seasons becoming rainier? What's happening with the environment, the terrain? I remember seeing some houses that were up on hills, and you making some comments about that. So, what are the impacts of climate change? How are they being manifested? How are they impacting the lives of people, especially in these remote villages?
Well, as I said before, the agriculture there is rain fed. There is no irrigation system, no pipe water, no central water system.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with respect to rainfall, which is has most significant impact on these villages and towns and cities in these countries.
Mm-hmm.
Two things are happening. It's so unpredictable now. You can't know when the rain comes when the rain comes.
Wow. Yeah.
Before now people could predict. Oh, rains are going to start by the middle of April,
Mm-hmm.
traditionally. Okay, so we start to prepare our land in March, and we plant our seeds to coincide with when we expect the rains to come. And then on the other end of the crop, we prepare our drying areas so that the harvesting usually comes to, like for rice, comes during the dry season, because you have to dry your rice before you store it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that the unpredictability in the start of the rainy season, that's one thing. Then rain comes, it comes too heavy, or it doesn't come at all.
Mm-hmm.
So even during the cropping season, when rains come, it comes in torrents. It washes away your crops.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes it doesn't come at all, and there's a drought in the middle of the growing season. You lose your crops. So that is the well, as you said, especially in the cities, people build substantial houses on the hillsides, like in Sierra Leone, in Freetown. There are a lot of hills around Freetown. It's a beautiful city, a lot of hills.
Mm-hmm.
And people go up there and build there. And when the rains come, there are landslides, taking houses, taking people. I think maybe 3 4 years ago, we all heard about this mudslide in Freetown,
Yes.
and hundreds of
Mm-hmm.
people were killed. Some of the
Mm-hmm.
bodies show up because the rivers come down, take everything with it down to the sea, and there are a lot of people living along the river banks, because when they came from escaping the war, a lot of them did not go back. They were there for 10 years and they have established roots, but where they live, their homes are very vulnerable because they're right along the banks of the river.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, and you have inland flooding.
you have inland flooding and you have these coastal flooding. So, but I would say the most significant impact of changing weather is on food security,
Mm-hmm.
because the weather's become so unpredictable in terms of rainfall that it limits food production and food storage.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and
And
again, we have technology that we take for granted, or we really don't use it as much as we could here in the U.S. Hydroponic,
right,
building simple hydroponic tanks so the food can grow indoors if people have the resources to construct, more buildings, more
right, right,
structures.
right, right, right. Yeah, yes. But back to what you said about the lighting situation. You can buy. At my house in Jamaica, I have these solar lights,
Mhm.
and I can buy some smaller units for less than $50.
Right.
I use them outdoors, so that and they're motion censored.
Hmm.
And you have the street light, I think, which will be more suitable for villages, the street light types.
Hmm.
And those cost maybe $130 or something like that.
Right.
And they are bright enough to to light up a whole area.
Hmm.
So we are not talking about a whole lot of money. A small revolving loan fund to help women in the villages with their small businesses. You can help 30 or 40 women for less than $500.
Hmm. Hmm.
And when you help a when, when you help a woman, you help a whole family.
You have the whole family. That's what I was going to say, and I know that some of our viewers actually are associated with or work with philanthropic entities, foundations, churches, etc. So I want you to, I want you to say that one more time. $500 can help how many women
Up to
with
30
their
women,
business?
30 women. And the
30
way
women.
we do it, it's not it's a gift, but it's a revolving loan fund where women borrow from and pay back.
Hmm.
And we have seen villages do this, and then they move on. They use that to help other villages.
Right,
Because
right.
a lot of these groups that you talk about groups, the initial groups were the one who who helped the other groups develop around them.
Mhm,
So that's the way the revolving fund works. You help these women in this village,
mhm. And
and
they
and they
help.
help other women in other villages.
Mhm.
So
Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a
And
multiple. It's the fishes and loaves
fish and
parable.
low, it multiplies.
Right, exactly.
Mhm. Multiplies. Great example, especially for a preacher.
Yes, example.
And so that's it. We're coming to a close, and that's a great place for us to be, for our viewers who are watching and see the need. We think we have need in our country, and we do, but it's relative. It's
Right,
relative. When we have a flood and it washes away some crops, we have federal agencies,
uh,
we have nonprofits, we have all kind of folks who can help out. That's kind of support does not exist in these villages. And so why don't you tell them in closing, Winston, how folks can contact you, go contact Agricultural Missions Incorporated so that they can help with the West African Initiative, because we can't deal with climate change and we cannot survive on this planet unless we all are involved and we all are helping one another to transition to a fossil fuel free economy, and also working on making our communities more resilient and helping them to adapt to the changing climate. So, how can people connect with you?
well, yeah, I guess agricultural missions. We have an office in New York, that in the Interchurch Center, 475 Riverside Drive, 15th floor, New York, New York 10115. Also, if you go to our website at agriculturalmissions.org, not agriculture, no, agriculturalmissions.org.
Mhm.
You will see more about our programs there. You will see how to contact us, and you can contact Reverend Woodbury. He's on our board. He's the chairman of our board. He has all the information. He's been to Africa with us to see the programs. I would just like by close by saying one thing. During the Ebola crisis in both of these countries, the government closed everything down. Markets, schools, women couldn't go to the market, and the UN and other agencies were distributing food. Not one village that West Africa Initiative was in needed food aid. They were all
Not
able.
one.
Not one village needed food aid
Mhm.
because they had enough food planted, and they harvested after these. They were able to take care of themselves. That's the
And
kind of impact the program is having on the ground there. If you want some numbers, there are about 13,000 uh, people that benefit from this program last year. 13,000 people.
13,000.
Yeah.
And see, that's what here we call community-led solutions,
Right.
where the
Exactly.
community is leading and they're doing solutions that's impacting people. 13,000 people.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
And
Mm,
I have not been to either of these countries since the middle of 1999. And the program is going well. The program is going well. And that is testimony to the sustainability of the program. And also, it validates the model we are using there.
Yes,
And I
yes.
thank you all for listening to me.
And thank you so much. Thank you very much. Our guest has been Dr. Winston Carroo with Agricultural Missions Incorporated. He is the Director of International Programs and also Project Director for the West African Initiative in Sierra Leone and Liberia. And just we thank you so much for your commitment over the years. I mean, bad times, good times, you've hung in there. And we need so many more people with your level of commitment and care and love for people and the planet. And so until next week, this time, we hope that you will join us again for our next episode of The Call. If you wish to contact us, you can do so by going to our website, New Alpha newalphacdc.com, or you can email us at newalphacdc@gmail.com. So until next week, this has been your call to direct action, to contribute, to advocate, and to work for policy changes that will make our world a better place. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next week, God bless. Take care. Be safe.
On and on now, pour out beats.